if you're an entrepreneur, if you're in that price, if you're in that 250, once you kind of get there, and there's still even benefit underneath that. But my biggest thing, it's about control, right? It's how much control do you want? And then as you go, it's starting to understand all those things you just named off, right? So as you start to accrue wealth, as you start to accrue, debt and all the things that kind of come along with that, it's such a huge, it's just another tool in your tool belt.
Yep.
And if you understand how to utilize it properly, and you have the attorneys and the CPAs and the bookkeepers in place to really understand that and navigate the space, there's so many advantages.
This is BetterWealth with Caleb Guilliams. Welcome back to another episode of the BetterWealth podcast. I am here with a good friend of mine, Matt Coulter, and we're going to be talking about foundations, nonprofits. We've had a lot of conversations, Matt, about like how my audience, like very much this idea of intentional living and unlocking intentional living. Like we realize that relationships are everything, and we want to give back. And I've been like, my eyes have been open to the power of creating foundations, the power of creating nonprofits, and the work that can be done, but then also some of the tax strategies that can be done along with that. And so thank you so much for making time out of your busy day to be on. I love your story. You're an inspiration. You're a great friend. And I'm just excited to add a ton of value to our audience in today's conversation.
Well, man, I'm blushing a little bit, but thank you so much for having me on, man. And yeah, I think with everything that's gone on in the last year and a half or so now, it's been a wild transition in kind of my world in a lot of different ways. But the end of the day, you said something already. It's about being intentional.
That's right.
And that is such a word that I think sometimes gets overused and underutilized. From the standpoint, and I stole that phrase from my friend Courtney. So if she listens to this, I got to give her a shout out for that. But it really is, man. It's been a space that's been really interesting for me. I attained a fair amount of success early on in life when I was younger. I'm 39 now. And so for me, having the opportunity to wake up every day and give to other people, like, to me, like, it's a life worth pursuing. And everybody has different passions and things that they find. But for me, I had a friend diagnosed real young when we were in our 20s. She was diagnosed with cancer. And a good friend of mine and myself created a foundation to help her. And that's what really kind of got everything started for me. And then as I've grown, like you, I'm an entrepreneur first. And so a big part of what I've done over the last couple of years is really kind of tried to create space for me to have conversations a lot like the ones that we've had.
Yeah.
And giving people an opportunity to understand that there's a lot of different ways to give back, and there's a lot of different ways to be impactful. Everybody just thinks, oh, I can write a check or do whatever. And obviously that's important, and those things are great, and you can take advantage of the tax strategies and things that exist. But at the same time, like, I'm really attached to people that have a cause. And that's always been my thing is, why do you want to give back? How do you want to do it? And then let's go be intentional about it. And as long as we create a good business strategy or a blueprint, whatever you want to call it, as long as you're willing to constantly reevaluate and adjust your course, and you can make a lot of impact with utilizing the world that we live in and technology and just the way that we're all connected now. It's an exciting time, because I think people are ready to go, okay, like, especially here in the United States.
Yeah.
Like, at the end of the day, wherever somebody may fall politically or racially or sexually or whatever it may be, I think everybody can agree that, like, there's room for improvement.
Right.
So let's figure that out and let's get to work. And that's really kind of what I base my work life on, is just kind of being intentional and taking action, because I think there's a lot of people that talk about a lot of things.
Right. Well, I remember us getting connected because I'm starting a apologetics Christian nonprofit, and I had a good friend of mine that was like, if you're in the space, you have to call Matt, my friend Matt, who was like, I think from a picture that you had, it was like a surfer dude in California that
Yeah,
was
for
enjoying the sun.
sure.
And so I'm like, okay, this is kind of interesting. And so we talked, and
Do I
it was
really
just like,
talk to this guy?
and it was like 2 minutes in, I was like, wow, you are amazing, and you were just super helpful and encouraging, and you just kind of you opened my eyes to like the world out there, and so like obviously I want people to be educated about the different ways that they can give. I know that there's some people listening to this that need to go the foundation route. I know there's some people listening to this that want to start a nonprofit. And I know that there's a ton of people listening to this that need to say, like, in the future, it's like a goal because it's not for everybody.
No.
And I know that, I've set up a private family foundation and also set up a nonprofit. And there's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of things that you don't necessarily know about going in, and it's important to work with somebody that can help. And and again, this whole show and our whole movement as a company is to just make people aware and unlock intentional living. And so what I'm curious is, I want to get a little more of your backstory. I know that you said you're 39 years old, you're in the space, but like you were very successful beforehand, and I think your eyes were open to seeing one of your friends being diagnosed with a deadly cancer, and it just gave you perspective. I just had a episode drop on my show, just remembering the life of Greg Helema, he was one of the founders of BetterWealth. He died 2 years ago with cancer, and it I'm telling you, it has given me a crazy perspective on life, and it just is a great reminder. And also, I wouldn't trade those moments being by his side.
Yeah.
But it also, like, I think people ask, and they're like, why do you do the things that you do? Why do you show up the way that you do? And it's just like, I just have perspective. So with that, talk a little bit about your upbringing. And then I want to then get into the trenches and give people real takeaways about, if you want your dollars to go further in the nonprofit world, helping people, what do they need to know? And like, help us weed through the weeds of
Sure.
all this,
Sure.
and really let's get some good takeaways.
Yeah, we'll definitely dive into that. And weeds is exactly right. It's an interesting space, but for me, born and raised in Southern California, great parents. I say this all the time. I hit the lotto with my parents. My parents divorced when I was young, when I was about 7 or 8, and then my dad got remarried to a wonderful woman, Barbara, my stepmom. Been my stepmom for God a long time now. And two sisters, one biological, one adopted. Gosh, my sister's birthday today. It's her 35th birthday. So shout out to my sister, Carly. And then my adopted sister, Grace, is a sophomore at San Diego State. So she's down there in quarantine, trying to figure out how to navigate the college space right now, which we've had some conversation about. That has been interesting, just trying to kind of be an advocate, and more than anything else, just kind of be an ear for her. Went to school in Los Angeles, lived down there, kind of lived in Newport, lived in Seal Beach, Long Beach kind of area. Like I said, went to school down there, had a great time. And when I moved home with the parents, like so many people do, just trying to kind of figure it out. And I think I was home maybe like 6 or 7 weeks, and I ran into a friend of my dad's, but a colleague as well. And he kind of just looked at me and he's like, what the hell are you doing? What's your plan? And to be perfectly frank, at that point, I was 21, 22. Didn't really know, to be honest. My dad had been in the kind of development, insurance, real estate space for the better part of his life. And so that's the only thing I really knew. And so my dad's colleague basically took me to lunch and just said, like, hey, I think I've got some opportunities for you. You'll have to, earn your keep, but there's probably some opportunities. And it was in the like title and escrow space, but it was in kind of residential and commercial. And so I knew the space because I grew up in it. And so found a lot of success, and kind of just took the ball and ran with it. Ended up opening my own residential real estate office with a partner of mine, Eric, and then ended up transitioning into commercial real estate. Ended up working kind of Ventura County, Los Angeles County, a little bit of Orange County, and then some spots across the country as things kind of grew. And enjoyed it. There were some things I was really good at. There were some things that I wasn't that great at. But I found a lot of kind of material and financial success early. And for me, I was kind of the first person in my friend group everybody else was either athletes or still going to college or whatever. And so um, it was looking back on it now, it was a wild experience because I kind of what I deem success from a financial and kind of monetary standpoint, I got all those things at like 23 and 24 years old. And so um, having unpacked all of that now, I understand, that was really hard for me because it was, I kind of was like, okay, if I can get to here by the time I'm 40, which I'm going to be 40 this year, it was like, okay, that'll be success. And I just got that a lot quicker than I thought. And so what happened is most people chase that carrot forever.
Yep.
And maybe they get it, maybe they don't. A lot of people don't. And they just kind of chase it and that's why I think you see a lot of people waking up in their 50s and 60s going, what did I do? Like I lived a life that wasn't intentional, that I fell into. And so there was parts of me that kind of felt that way. And then had a friend get sick, but right before that, I had friends that had an orphanage in Haiti.
Mm.
And this was post earthquake, and going down there and spending some time kind of, and then being able to travel prior to that and really kind of being immersed in some third world countries and really just kind of being in those places for a significant amount of time. I think what the biggest takeaway, you've used the word perspective, and that for me, those trips internationally changed everything.
Isn't it crazy that we go down to serve other people, but then we're the ones that, I mean, the word that comes to my mind is we're the ultimate beneficiary of like, I
I
came to
felt
serve and you guys gave me more than I could ever give you.
I felt guilty flying home
Yeah.
because I felt like I had such a life altering experience, and I felt like I was walking away with so much and I gave so little.
Yeah.
And being a little bit older and looking at that now, I understand it. But in that moment, I was kind of like, whoa, like, what am I going to do? And then just like everything else, you get home and then you kind of get back into the swing of, life here in the United States and all the kind of things that we have and all the pressures that we create for ourselves. And, but over the next couple of years, I had a friend that was diagnosed with cancer, had 4 or 5 friends, all kind of that I either was really connected with or like 1 degree of separation, all diagnosed with cancer in like a 2.5 year time frame. And so all of a sudden, I was still doing real estate and kind of in that entrepreneurial, creating businesses and doing things. But then I found myself kind of racing home to work on some of the nonprofit stuff. And very long story, things just continued to speed up. And the first foundation that we created kind of was in a position to where it was either we were going to have to hire somebody and I was going to have to teach them everything, or I was just going to do it myself. And so that was kind of the inflection point where it was like, okay, what do you want to do with your life? And for me, I like nice stuff just like everybody else, and I enjoy making money and having nice things and eating good meals and kind of doing all those things. But a lot of the monetary stuff and things that I was buying, it was fleeting. It was, hey, that's a sick car. I'm in love. I feel like a badass getting out of it, going to the valet or doing whatever you're doing. But then it's like, okay, 6, 7, 8 weeks down the road, it's just another car and it just gets you to A to B.
Yep.
And then it's like, okay, it's the next car, or it's better rims at that time or a better sound system. And then it was, well, I've got this watch, but this one's better. Or, hey, that house is rad, but there's a better neighborhood, or this house is bigger. And you start to realize if you can take a step up or back and look at things objectively, for me, I started to realize that all the stuff that I was chasing for happiness was all that stuff needed to be the byproduct and not the focus.
Yep.
And that was where I kind of lost myself a little bit. And so transitioning into running the foundation full time and then to where I'm at now, 143 Collective is my company that I founded a couple years ago. And it was really set up for just a place for my mind to kind of run wild. And then the board members and advisors and volunteers that I have that I've kind of accrued over the last, 12, 15 years or so. I have a lot of people giving a lot of contributions from their time to monetary compensation and things of that nature. But being able to wake up and work on something that I know is going to exist past me is what really fuels me.
Cool.
Is that understanding of all the people that gave of their time for me, all the people that were mentors, that are mentors. To me, it's about taking what you learn and trying to give it to the next person. And I really try to live my life that way. And it's not perfect. I make tons of mistakes just like everybody, but waking up and chasing that and trying to just be better every day, it's fulfilling for me in a way that like I don't think the monetary stuff would have ever been.
Yep. Man, I appreciate you sharing that. I think it's important to hear people's honest stories, and I can tell you, people won't last long on this show if they're not willing to open up, because it's like so many you see so many people on the front end,
Yeah.
but they're not willing to share the journey that they've had to come through. And so thank you for sharing that. I'm really curious when it comes to private family foundations. We can talk about foundations. Like I obviously have been turned on to this because of some of the tax benefits. And if you look at majority of billionaires have foundations. Now that you're listening to this podcast, everybody, or watching this on YouTube, you're going to start noticing people that, are giving through their foundation. And I think some of the more popular ones are Bill and Melinda Gates. I know that Warren Buffett has a foundation. I know that the Clintons have a foundation, and I pretty much majority. It hit the news a while ago when Mark Zuckerberg donated 99% of his wealth into his foundation. It's like when you understand kind of what's going on, you go like, okay, I see what's going on here.
Like it feels good, but like
yeah.
Actually we're saving all this money and we're using the laws and the rules and the regulations.
Right.
And we're using them to our advantage the best
right.
way that we can. And frankly, that is just it's something that I've learned as I've gotten into it, because that's not why I got into it.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I understand the value.
Right.
The
values. So what I want to go through, and I'm assuming that we'll be able to talk about this, is number one, donor advisor fund. I think that's for people that are giving a lot of money. It's my understanding that they can give to a foundation, get the benefit, and then they can tell the donor advisor fund where they want to give, and it creates one receipt instead of multiple. So that's one. It's starting a nonprofit, which is something that I'm going through the process, and I'm telling you, it's not the most fun experience, but
red tape for sure.
Right, but I think it was the best thing. And then it's a foundation, and there's multiple types of foundations out there. My hope is that we can get an understanding of the three, and maybe there's a fourth that I'm not thinking of.
Yeah.
But why don't we walk through like what you're up to in 143 Collective, and just let's bring a little clarity to different ways that you can be charitable and the pros and cons to each.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, 143 Collective really started out as a way for me to kind of take all the ideas that I had and kind of have an avenue to, run wild, just like for any other entrepreneur, creating an LLC or a shell or whatever it may be. And so with that said, I wanted to be a little bit more forward facing. It is a 501c, public nonprofit. And essentially, not only did I want to create my own programs and create my own ways to give, because obviously cancer has been something that has run through my life. And so I'm very dedicated in a couple different foundations. I run a foundation called the Beautiful Foundation, which I'm the president of with my partners, Nikki and Rihanna Capri. And so we have it's specific to women and women fighting cancer and providing wigs and hair donations and stuff. And so that's just one of 22 or 23 programs that I'm either the president of, run internally, or I'm advising on. And so as I developed 143 Collective, it really was created exactly to the reason of what you talked about. There's so many avenues within the nonprofit space, and there's so many ways to do good. I wanted to give people multiple avenues to do that. So donor advised fund, fiscal sponsorship, those two kind of go hand in hand. And so there's a couple different ways on the back end how that is set up. But the idea for that is really to be able to connect with people, with organizations, with companies that are going, hey, we want to do good, but we don't want to go through all the red tape, the 1023 forms, the tax returns, the 99, all that stuff. We don't want to deal with that. We just want to do good. And so I understand that on a very deep level, not only from being a business owner, but now being in the operational side on kind of the nonprofit side. And so within 143 Collective, we have a fiscal sponsorship, donor advised specific avenue to go. And so it really is set up for a litany of reasons, but the biggest reason I have it kind of within the scope of work is to give us kind of the nimbleness and the flexibility to adjust to things in real time, because we live in a time now where we consume information 15 seconds at a time, and it's
Yep.
okay, mass shooting today, tomorrow there's something else. Like there's just all this information all the time. And so what I started to figure out was, we live in a very reactionary time because of the way that we consume information. And so that's not changing anytime soon. So I really wanted to facilitate at least that arm of my company to be flexible and to be able to act in real time. And so a lot of the times with that kind of fiscal sponsorship or donor advised fund, what it ends up being is, like I said, a person, organization, or company that has something on their heart that, they want to take part in, they want to be able to give, but again, they don't want to go through all the kind of the growing.
Yeah, I think a common one that some of our clients are a part of is that I think there's like a Christian foundation or a donor advisory fund, and the concept is and tell me if I'm wrong here. It's simple because you just donate money to it. You can then you can then give anonymously, or you can give, it can say on behalf of you, so you can like also give to other people, missionaries, and all this stuff. The disadvantage, I would say, is kind of the lack of control. Once you donate that money, it's in an organization. You have some control. You don't, you
But
can't invest that money, and ultimately it's now the foundation's, and you're really, they can choose not to give it. Now, obviously, that wouldn't be good going forward.
absolutely. And it's all, you understand this. Relationships are everything.
Yeah,
I don't care if it's BetterWealth, if it's 143 Collective, or you're selling cars. Like
right,
it really is that personal relationship, and it is that understanding of like, yes, when you're giving money to us, in obviously there's contracts and all kinds of things to
right.
protect both parties, but yeah, the money's coming to us.
Yeah,
And at the end of the day, it's my reputation and it's my
right,
company's reputation. And so for me, I'm very choosy with the people that I choose to work with, especially now because we're so busy
yeah,
and just like everybody, and we've got so many fantastic programs and outreach that we're doing. My biggest thing is connecting with people that are intentional and
that's right.
have that, because I do have some programs that require a little bit more hand holding than others.
Yep,
And I don't mind doing that at all, as long as it's authentic and it's
yep,
coming from the right place. Now, with that said, the other part of that conversation really is when you start looking at athletes or TV personalities or people that are starting to accrue wealth, they got to be able to put that money to different places. And when I was younger, I was giving to a couple different organizations because I just felt like that was the thing to do. I really didn't understand the financial ramifications and positive things that could come from it. But I had such a negative taste in my mouth because what I was giving to, I kind of gave, and then it was like, okay, well, I don't really know what they did with
yeah,
that. And
yeah.
so 143 Collective has kind of just taken that feeling and went to the other side.
Okay.
So really for us, it's about transparency, and it's
Yep.
about going, hey, here are the causes we're working on. If you have a internal fiscal program with us or a donor advised fund, you can give to any one of these causes, obviously that are internal.
Yep.
Or hey, if there's external relationships and things, obviously we can give there. And being in the position that I am, I understand what organizations are actually doing real work
Right.
and what organizations are just kind of like collecting money.
Yep.
And that's not to discount any of those people because they're playing within the
Is is there a website that people can go to if they want to do the donor advisor fund to look at? Like, I know, again, there's Christian ones, there's different theme ones. Is there one place where they can find that, or what's the best place to do research on
kind
it?
of all over the place depending on where you look at. That's why I'm so thankful when people get directed to me, because a lot
Okay.
of the times you have to have that internal that just initial conversation to figure out what they really
Okay.
want to do, because some people go, oh my gosh, I want to have my own
Yep.
nonprofit, and then we have the
Yeah.
conversation, they're like, hey, just do the program, that seems way easier.
Yeah, yeah, no, I could say I don't think everyone should do their own nonprofit, but okay. So that's number one. Now I want to talk about the difference between a foundation and a nonprofit. And correct me if I'm wrong. I know a lot about like I know a little bit about a lot of things.
Yeah.
Okay, so a private family foundation or foundation is really meant to, you can have wealth, and majority of the time it's the person that's setting up is the primary donor.
Correct.
You can give it, you get that write-off, you control that capital. You have to give so much of corpus. I think the law's at least 5% of the balance.
Depending on the state, I think it's somewhere between 5 and 7%.
Okay. So there's benefits of, because, through the foundation, you can own other things and all this. But at the end of the day, you need to then give to nonprofits. And so it's essentially a way, if you're seeing this on YouTube, it's you have money, you donate it to your private family foundation, you maintain control, then you do charitable work, you can give to nonprofits and do other things, and you get the deduction up front, you're able to have control, but the foundation's not necessarily doing a ton. I mean, it could, but the goal is to then give to other nonprofits.
Correct.
Nonprofit is it's not a private family foundation. It's a 501c3. It's usually, here's the cause that we're doing.
Yeah.
Cancer. Mine's again on Christian apologetics, other things, and then people can donate. Then you can give, you can give them a tax deduction, write off, whatever, and then you can do nonprofit work. That's the new version of
you knocked it out.
Okay.
What I see with a lot of family foundations is exactly what you said, and it is a wonderful path and a great kind of thing to set up. There's a lot of athletes, a lot of people that TV personalities, celebrities, people of that nature, business people, obviously. It's a great way to this is going to sound bad, but for athletes that have, let's say an NBA player, right? NBA player goes to the draft, gets drafted. He's in his second or third season. He's starting to make significant amounts of money. Those guys usually aren't, those guys are businesses within themselves. And a lot of those guys start having people that they're employing, people that they're taking care of. And I'm always just like, the best thing that you could ever do once you start making just even a little bit of money is to create a family foundation or a donor advised fund, because then that way, instead of just paying your friend to do whatever he's doing, you employ that person through the family foundation, you pay them through the family foundation. And then all of a sudden, that money that you would have been paying him is actually going to the family foundation, and you are receiving that deduction. So it's just about being intelligent with your money and understanding what the rules and how to play those things. So that's the biggest first thing that you can kind of go down that road. And for me, the family foundations and donor advised funds and things like that, that's when you really want to maintain control, right? You want to be able to go, hey, we're going to give to these 4 organizations each year. They do all the great work, and we just filter the money to them.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can tell you firsthand, there's a lot of pros. The cons are there's a lot of paperwork. It has to be done well. And so my question is, I want to talk about the pros and cons.
Yep.
And I want to be honest with the cons. And then I will also want to know, when does it make sense to start doing research on if this is something that you should look into? Yeah.
So the pros and cons is exactly what you said. Running a nonprofit or creating your own family foundation, it sounds great, and the pros are fantastic, don't get me wrong, but it's just the barrier to entry is heavy, and people go, oh well, hey, I'm not gonna thanks for your help, but I think I'm just going to do it on LegalZoom. Awesome.
Yeah,
go for it. I'll talk to you in 6 months.
Yeah, well, I know firsthand, setting it up is not that hard. It's maintaining it and making sure that it's done properly. That's where a lot of people come to me and say, Caleb,
what am
I'm not being compliant. How do we get this thing figured out? And it could be scary.
It can, and it can get out of control real quick. And that's what I try to tell everybody. I'm like, I'm not a hard sell guy. I never have been. Not my personality, not how I do things, but I am very direct with people. There's moving parts, and there's a lot of language and a lot of things that, for me, the first 2, 3, 4 that I did, way over my head. And now, I've got a little bit more expertise and in a pretty significant amount of hours in this thing. So I understand it. But yeah, that's where people don't understand. They're like, oh, I'll just create this foundation and whatever. And it's like, just the maintenance.
Yeah.
You got to have somebody at least part-time, even if it's just a very, very kind of small thing. And so that's where I'm such an advocate of those kind of donor advised funds. It's like, you can't be everything to everybody and you can't know everything about everything. And so
Yep.
that's where relationships become so important.
What's the typical price that someone would pay just to maintain a private family foundation?
Gosh, you know what? To get one set up and go, I try to tell people like you should have like, you're gonna really do it the right way. Like I always tell people 10 grand. Just go, if you got 10 grand just to get it rolling and get the proper people in place and to really set it up and do it the right way and then be able to set you up for that next year. I kind of go, I always tell people 10 grand.
And then what about to maintain it?
And then to maintain it is probably half of that.
Okay. So
But
just for people, okay, there's a
yeah,
lot of benefits to a private family foundation.
absolutely.
Tons of benefits. And we're talking about $10,000 to set up, 5,000 just to maintain, make sure that the meeting minutes are done. Is it 990 F?
Yes. Yeah. So there's extended 990s.
Yeah.
There's, and so that's what I was going to say next is there's too many variables in that. So like
Right.
if the family foundation, if you're giving millions of dollars to it, yeah, there's going to be a lot more red tape than there would be. And then, the other parts of the equation is, are you donating, domestically, or are you
Yep.
donating to foreign institutions? Because if you're donating internationally, there's a whole other set of rules and things of that nature. So
Right. But I would say, we serve a lot of different people. So the people that give about $5,000 to $10,000 a year, probably you don't want to do a private family foundation
make
because
any sense?
you would just be paying money to establish something and not being able to have any money to donate it to. So the donor advisor fund is something that you want to look into. There's a lot of great resources. Matt, you're one of them.
Yeah, we've got,
And then,
yeah,
or just give directly to a nonprofit and then just keep track of the receipts. Um,
absolutely.
but what is the amount? Like I've kind of heard like once you're donating around 50K or more, it's like almost a no brainer. I don't, again,
Yeah, like I kind of tell everybody, I've never really kind of looked at it from like how much are you donating each year. I've kind of looked at it from like, what are you making?
yeah.
And so I kind of tell everybody, I'm like, if you're at 250 grand or more, you should have this.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah, that's a good metric because there's people that are listening to this that are way above that, and then there's quite a few people that are like, that is something to look forward to, and so I just really want to be honest with people and make sure that it's a good fit. So that's a good metric, and obviously there's a lot more. I'm planning on having a series sometime in the future talking about some of the benefits,
yeah.
because my eyes have been open, and I've had some mentors that had their real estate owned by a private family foundation, had some other things owned by a private family foundation, and employed some of their family through that. And not in like it was they were doing amazing work. And
Oh,
so,
absolutely.
so I was like, interesting, like this is all legal? And they're like, yes. And then when you start doing the research and you realize like it can own assets and it can be an expenditure to the private family foundation, and you're like, interesting.
It's
And
very,
someone once told me this. They're like, there's involuntary tax and voluntary tax. Like we have, like you choose. And so it's like the people that really know what's going on, just imagine being able to donate a lot more money but maintain control over that, and really it's that extra middleman, I would say, in the equation that can be beneficial if it makes sense to set it up properly. Is there anything you want to add about the private family foundation?
no, I just really look at it and I go, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're in that price, if you're in that 250, once you kind of get there, and there's still even benefit underneath that. But my biggest thing, it's about control,
Yep.
right? It's how much control do you want? And then as you go, it's starting to understand all those things you just named off, right? So as you start to accrue wealth, as you start to accrue, you know, debt, and all the things that kind of come along with that, it's such a huge it's just another tool in your tool belt.
Yep.
And if you understand how to utilize it properly, and you have the attorneys and the CPAs and the bookkeepers in place to really understand that and navigate the space, there's so many advantages.
Yep.
And especially for people that are making chunks of money at a time.
Yep.
You said it, voluntary or involuntary, you're losing it either way. But I think there's a way, with the family foundations or the donor advised funds and things of that nature, you can control it and have a little bit more, direction on what that money does. And then I always am like, if you're employing people, especially family members, instead, it's so easy to just write them a check or give them cash or to do whatever. It behooves you to do it this way.
Yep. That's cool. All right, now let's talk about a nonprofit and
Yeah.
when it makes sense to do that. And I mean, there are a couple people that have come to me that said, like, because we just attract some of the most amazing people in our community. And they're
Uh-huh.
just like, I really want to help these type of people. Cancer is an example. There's a lot of people that want, like, one of the things that I want to do is I want to wreck CEOs' worlds by taking them overseas or just in communities in America and have them be present with the people, give perspective. Like you could go to a leadership conference or you could like be in the trenches for 2 or 3 days.
Dude.
And like that's something that I want to do in the future. And so it's one of those things. What would your advice be to have someone who's not doesn't have a ton of money right now,
Mhm.
but has a mission that's bigger than themselves, that really wants to give back, wants to be able to raise money? What are some of the things that they need to know? And obviously, anyone that wants to reach out to you, like we'll
Oh,
at
yeah,
the end,
we'll
we'll
give all the information
right.
and do all that stuff.
But save them 5-10 years of you going through this. And
Yeah,
what are some of the things that they need to know, and what are some of the things to look out for? Because I think it's a phenomenal way if you're mission focused to be able to raise money in a legal way and to have a powerful impact on the world.
absolutely. I think the biggest thing that I tell everybody that's like, I want to do a nonprofit, I go, great, you're starting a business. Because the word nonprofit to me, like, it's just it's overused and
Yep.
it's like people don't know what it is. It's just like this big like, oh, nonprofit, cool. Like, and so for me, we've talked about this through this whole conversation and through a lot of our previous conversations. It's about being intentional and it's what do you really want to do? And so to me, creating your own standalone nonprofit, it isn't about money. It isn't about any of those things. It's about the idea of what are you trying to do
Mm-hmm.
and on what level are you trying to do it? And there's a multitude of ways to do it. There are tiny little foundations that have huge impact that you'll never hear about. And then you've got massive organizations that don't do anything.
Yep.
So for me, my advice is always about being intentional with what you're trying to do. And
Yep.
if you're trying to be intentional about giving, I'm always an advocate of either starting your own nonprofit or kind of going down the road of like, hey, maybe I can do a fiscal sponsorship first or a donor advised fund first to kind of navigate it and figure it out. But to your point, it gives people a way to rally around what you're doing. So when people are really passionate and they know exactly what their cause is, I always am like, you either need to start the program to like the baby step, or let's just go do it.
Yep.
And so that's what I try to tell everybody. I'm like, the biggest, most important thing is trying to figure out why you're starting the foundation. And once you start it for whatever demographic or geographic or whatever that cause is, then it's really just about getting down to what does that avatar look like? Who are you
Right.
actually trying to help?
Well,
And
yeah, and so how would you go about starting a nonprofit? Because again, like what kind of paperwork needs to be signed? How would you set that up? How would you advise someone to be like, obviously you want to make sure that you are starting a business,
yeah,
and it's very much, and it's my understanding that it's like you have a cause, you're going to be the thing that people can donate to help that cause,
correct.
and so what are some of the landmines to avoid, and what are some of the areas that you can start today doing research on that?
Yeah. So my biggest thing that I try to tell everybody, I think there's a million fantastic uses for LegalZoom. I think if you jump off that bridge and try to go down that road, I've done it, and I did it when I didn't know anything, and it took me double the amount of time
Right.
because I didn't take the advice, and I was too lazy to call somebody that had expertise.
Yep.
And so that is always my biggest thing, whether it's calling myself or reaching out to me, or even just starting with your attorney or CPA, because both those people are going to have huge amounts of information. And if they don't, if they're worth their weight, they're going to direct you to somebody that is. The biggest, most important thing is clarity of your cause, because when you start filing all the paperwork, the biggest thing that you're going to have to kind of figure out is your 1023 form. And the 1023 form is essentially your reasoning for why the government should give you tax exemption. And there are very specific rules, parameters, hoops to jump through when it comes to that form. And if you have not done that yourself or you're working with somebody that has not done that before, you're gonna have a lot of back and forth with the IRS. The first time I did it, I did use LegalZoom because I didn't know what I was doing. And I mean, our first nonprofit took us like a year and a half
Yep.
just to get formed, just to
Yep.
get it to like submitted, not even approved.
Yep.
So now knowing what I know, there's so many ways to kind of trick the system and utilize the tools that are in place to your advantage. But yeah, getting clarity on exactly who you're trying to help, why you're trying to help them,
Yep.
what the process is going to be. Once you have that, all that stuff lives inside that 1023 form.
Got
Um,
it.
so
And there's a way to like get your EIN number and be able to start being technically like, hey, the government represents you as a nonprofit, but then you also have to then file all like, and you have to
yeah,
have that dialed in, man. Like there's a lot of questions.
there's a lot of, there's depending on the type of charity, whether it's a public facing or a private charity, there's a lot of moving parts in that
Yep.
space.
So
Um,
if someone didn't have like if someone wanted to bootstrap it themselves, kind of
yep.
deal, and that definitely is an avenue. We'll talk about the pros and cons to each. If someone wanted to bootstrap it themselves, obviously you need to account for someone to help you with accounting. So you either need to do that or you need to find someone to be able to do that with you. And then there's obviously getting the non profit status. There is some hard costs. I think it's 500 when it's all said and
Yeah,
done.
there's state and then obviously IRS fees and
Yep.
yeah, so there's $2,500.
Okay,
But
so it's that much.
by the time you get it all done, because even if like, so say you're going to bootstrap it and you're going through LegalZoom, right? That's going to be a couple $100 at
Okay.
least. And then you have all the state filing fees, all the, the IRS, all those different fees. When you really kind of get down into it, you're probably around somewhere between 2,500 $2,500.
Okay.
Just
Okay. So
um,
so you get that established, and then is there ongoing cost? Just saying from the bootstrap because
yeah, from a
obviously,
bootstrap standpoint, like there's probably there's going to be some registration fees and things that you're going to have annually,
okay,
but those don't really accrue to that much money. Um, and so that's where, when I kind of use that $10,000 number, that was including this kind of
okay,
what I was talking about, because I just kind of go with your state fees, whether it's an attorney that files it for you or
yep,
something that you're getting advice from, because you're going to have to get advice at some point, because especially if you're coming into the situation, you've never done it before, there's just going to be things that you need. So whether it's connecting with somebody like myself or an attorney or a CPA, so
yep.
there's going to be a little bit of money involved there, but you can get it done for pretty cheap, especially if you're not in a huge hurry.
Right, right. And what's the pros to doing a nonprofit versus a foundation?
um, I would say do a foundation if you really have bigger goals of like a specific group of people that you want to help,
Okay,
whether it's a missionary type of situation or a cancer type of thing, or whatever. If you have a very specific cause and you want to create a program or you want to create something new that is going to help that group, I'm always like, just do this.
yep,
Most people go, hey, I want to have one event a year, I want it to benefit this demographic of people, and they think they have to start a nonprofit, and you don't.
yep.
And that's what I always try to tell people. Most people go, I want to start a nonprofit. I'm like, no, you don't. Like, I don't think you need to. There's ways to take advantage of all the tax pros without having your own foundation. So it really just kind of, situation is unique and separate. But I would say if you really have a cause on your heart and you're really looking to make an impact there or make a significant change in that space, do a foundation. If you just want to direct money to something and you don't necessarily want to like change the world in that type of way,
Hmm.
do a family foundation, donor advised fund, fiscal sponsorship. That's definitely the way to go. So those are kind of the two different avenues.
Okay, so you're using the word foundation for both, but so in other words, like a nonprofit, if you want to go for it on something very specific, in case like in our case, like I'm having someone internal that's going to be creating courses and all this stuff and people give, nonprofit would be better for that.
Yes.
Okay. And
100%.
then a private family foundation or donor advised fund is like, hey, I wanna help I want to be able to give money and then be able to give to multiple things,
Correct.
some in sectors, but I don't necessarily want to commit to X, Y, or Z. And I'm not necessarily going to be raising money. It's mainly for me. And
Yes.
that gives you a ton of control. So it's like the private family foundation, in my opinion, is like really beneficial, gives you control of giving. It gives you a lot of perks, and it really makes sense for people making 250,000 plus who want to be charitable. For nonprofit, and I think you use the word found because at the core they're both foundations, but a nonprofit 501c3 is like, I want to be specific in this cause. It's going to cost anywhere from 5 to 10K if you want to bootstrap it. So it's not cheap, but that's where you raise money and say, hey, so and so you have the same belief as I. Like, if you give, this is what we're going to be using your money for.
Correct.
Is that kind of
that's a really good overview of the whole thing, and I really just tell people to do your research, because it is, a lot of people kind of come into it and go, oh, I want to do a nonprofit. I'm like, ooh, maybe you do, but hey, did you know there's all these other options? And I think that's just that's always the great conversations that I have, is when I am able to kind of use my expertise and let people know, hey, like, there's a way to do what you're doing without all the reinventing the wheel, so to speak.
So in other words, I'll use this podcast to plug my stuff. It's like, hey, if you're interested in donating to my foundation, let me know. If you're interested in donating to my my nonprofit, let me know. I'll take the call.
And we talked about this, I think, even before we hit record. It's just about relationships.
Totally.
And that's really what I try to build. It is relationships with people. And it's great because a lot of those initial conversations, we're talking about something real small, and hey, yeah, we could do that. That's going to be great. And then 2 or 3 years down the road, what we're actually doing is so much more impactful, and just, I think more times than not, it ends up being incredibly special, and something that I think people were like, wow, like, I had this idea and it turned into this thing, and look at all the people we're helping in life. That's the stuff that I geek out on. So
and man, that's why you're on the show. Is I just really appreciated how helpful you've been, and just what a great friend you are. Talk to me a little bit about, and I know that you've mentioned this a couple times, but like, obviously there's the bootstrap way to do it, okay? And there's things, LegalZoom and all that stuff, and like, the pros to that is it's cheaper to get started, but in most cases, almost all cases, it's like, you cut corner early on, you're just later you're gonna have to solve something or find a team. And so so your company really comes involved in saying, hey, we'll be the resource to help you draft the documents. If you need someone to do CFO work, we'll do that. We'll make sure the meeting minutes are done properly, and really help people, almost be like the behind the scenes, because in most cases you're getting into a nonprofit or want to start a family foundation because of the cause, not because of the work. And I've seen personally, it's like, man, do I really want to do this? Because like, it's just a headache. But the potential, the future potential, is why I'm sticking in.
Yeah.
And so that's what I believe you do. Do you want to explain a little bit more, if people are interested, they're in the process of doing research, and how they can get connected with you and why you guys exist?
Yeah, I mean, I really existed. I existed because when I was trying to give, I had such a bad experience when I was younger in my life. I gave to a couple bigger foundations and causes and things of that nature, and or people like that, I should say. And I just was very underwhelmed. I was like, oh wow, like, and I wasn't giving, like, it wasn't like I was giving millions of dollars to these causes. I was giving, some, $10,000-$15,000, but to me at that time, it was a ton of money. And so for me, when I got that, it was something that I always remembered. So when I built 143 Collective, a big part of that was I wanted to create something that was going to be, that we were going to take action, because so many causes that are real big and been around a long time, and a lot of people give to create awareness. And awareness is another word for we don't do and it really is unfortunate. You've got some of these causes that have done incredible things, and they're giving, they're getting millions of dollars, and maybe they're doing some good work, maybe they're not. But for me, with 143 Collective, it was about creating ways to give people a way to love other people. And so whether that was a personal friend or somebody that got referred to me, or an athlete or a TV personality or whatever it may be, I wanted to have options because, like you said, I have this heart. I want to help. I want to do these things. But then you get into it and you're like, I started a business. Like, I didn't want to do that. And so for me with 143 Collective, it was about going, hey, I get that you want to do that, but hey, did you know you can do this?
Yep.
And that was really a way for me that not everybody's going to quit their profession and start a nonprofit.
Yep.
But there's a lot of people that want to do good and want to love on other people, and they just need an avenue to do it. And
Right.
so there's a lot of different ways. There's huge foundation. There's all kinds of different charitable things to give to. What I really wanted to create was a way for people like yourself to connect with somebody that looks like me, that is in my age group, that has been in the trenches of the nonprofit space and really understands what it means to give back and make tangible progress. And so there's a litany of ways to do that, from creating your own nonprofit to a donor advised fund or a fiscally sponsored program. And so for me, I wanted to be able to take my tool belt and give it to any one of my friends that wanted to do better or wanted to give back or wanted to, help people. And so that didn't exist. And you're an entrepreneur. And I looked at it and went, wow, that thing doesn't, there's other nonprofit sponsors and family foundations. There's a lot of people, but there's nobody that had my story, that had the experience that I have at 39. I've been running nonprofits now for a decade. And so there's a lot of people and a lot of leaders of nonprofits that are usually a little bit older and maybe not quite, I like to think that I have my hand on the pulse a lot of times in a lot of the areas that we work. And I try to, we always have youth committees. We have, I'm just an advocate of like trying to learn every single day, because if I can do that, it allows me to pass it on to whoever I'm working with. And so for me, it was always just about being able to take everything that I've learned and give it to everybody, so that hopefully that will have a ripple effect and we just help more people.
I love it, man. How can people connect with you?
So best way, obviously, is social media. 143 Collective. It's on all the channels. So it's, Instagram is probably where we're most active. But I encourage everybody just to go to our website. It's 143collective.org. And it talks about all of our programs. It talks about all the stuff that we're doing. And then also, it gives you ways to connect with us to, talk about programs or ideas or things that you want to do. And I just always am an advocate of giving out my email and really kind of putting it on people that, hey, if you have questions, I'm an open book. So I always just give people my email, and that's usually it, man. I'm a little old school when it comes to that stuff, but
man, you're really aging yourself there. It's
wild, man.
I appreciate that. The way I end all my interviews is what I call the legacy question, which is very interesting. What we're talking about, legacy, nonprofits, and all this stuff. But it goes like this: this is your last day on Earth. You're with the people that you love the most, and you can't give them anything. You can't give them money. You can't give them anything in writing. You just have one last conversation. What's that conversation going to consist of, and what are you going to share?
That's a great way to end an interview. It's a big question, and I'll kind of give you two answers. The first answer is, if you're not doing what you love, if you're not doing what you love, what you're passionate about, you're wasting time. Straight up. Like, people make decisions all the time that pigeonhole them into lifestyles and situations that are probably less than ideal. And so I tell young people all the time, like, figure out what you love to do and go do it, and the money will figure itself out. Because if you don't, you're going to end up like I did, chasing something that doesn't really give you happiness long term. And then the second part of that answer kind of is in the same vein, and it's, you're the only person that's going to make yourself happy. And you got to work on yourself to figure that out. And I really am a huge advocate of like that self-help and self-awareness and being intentional. And so I would share with my friends and my family that, man, please just love what you do and be intentional about your life, man. To me, those are the two most important things, because without that, everything else just seems like it would fray apart. So that's it, man.
Matt, I appreciate you showing up, being present, being vulnerable, sharing the insights of what the good, the bad, the ugly about being charitable, and some of the, so hopefully that this opens some of our eyes to say, hey, there's some options out there that might be advantageous. Thank you so much. Thank you for what you're doing. And I'm excited to see all of what is built and all the people that you help. And I'm excited to be part of that. So take care.
Thanks, man.
Thank you so much for listening to the BetterWealth podcast. It would mean the world to me if you could hit subscribe, leave a review, and share this with the people that you know and love.